Welcome all to Seaweed Brain, a Percy Jackson podcast where we are sort of winding down our post-Disney Plus Season 1 era of conducting special interviews and doing specific analysis episodes on the adaptation TV show. Today, I'm very excited to once again be sharing a deeply niche conversation on the crossover of Percy Jackson, mythology, and a little musical theater. We've got Micah Johnson-Levy in the house, casting director of Hadestown the musical, amongst many other cool things, so stick around. Okay. Hello, I'm Erica, co-host of this podcast, along with Carter. What's up, Carter?
Hi.
Should I say my name? What do I
Please
do?
introduce yourself. Yes.
Okay, yeah. I'm Micah, and my entire life has been leading up to this moment.
Yes! I love when someone comes on the podcast with that energy.
As you'll learn with my qualifications, what else was I going to do but be on a Percy Jackson podcast? I'm built for this.
You're from Michigan.
Yes, I am.
You studied folklore and mythology at Harvard.
And the classics, so double major.
Oh, double What do you call it again? Concentrating?
Well, we call them concentrations, but I try not to pull that out.
The joint concentration.
Yeah, I was a joint concentrator, but I don't like to say that because then I have to explain it and people are like, that's annoying. So I was a double major, folklore and mythology in the classics.
That's okay. Carter was also a joint concentrator at Harvard, so I'm used to the discourse. And then when you were in college, you also interned was it at Stuart Whitley? At the time?
Well, yeah. So I interned after my junior year of college. I did a summer internship with Stuart Whitley, which was my introduction to all of them and really the world of casting.
Right. Formerly known as Stuart Whitley, currently known as two separate casting offices. Broadway casting office that does a bunch of cool stuff. Oh, also during college, you worked at ART, the American Repertory Theater in Cambridge, right?
Yeah, I was an intern in their access and equity department. And so I primarily focused on things relating to exactly what it sounds like, increasing accessibility in theaters and working on accommodations and learning more about how we can make physical theaters more accessible places.
Wow. You found out about Stuart Whitley through like research in college, like looking for internships?
Yeah, so my journey into casting is one of those ones that's kind of awkward because like what drew me to casting was nothing. And I don't mean that in the sense of like, oh, I had no interest. I didn't know it existed. Like there was no way for me to be like, this is my dream. Because in order to have a dream, you have to have the vocabulary to define it.
Totally.
Like I was into theater in high school. By my senior year, like I was the student producer. I was the president of the club. Like I was like, theater is my dream. I decided my senior year of college that theater is what I wanted to do with my life. So I was applying to sort of liberal arts colleges originally, but then I was like, oh, I'm also going to apply to theater programs. Because I was like, this is what I want to do. My joke is that I got into Michigan 3 times because I got into like LS&A and then I got into the residential college and then I got into SMTD.
Nice.
So I was planning on going to Michigan in the School of Music, Theater, and Dance for design and production. I had my enrollment deposit was in. I had decided, and then I got into Harvard.
Wow.
And so my life shifted. It became this conversation of, which do I go to, like theater or sort of pursuing like just whatever. And people just told me like theater will be there when you get back. Like you can always decide to do theater. You can't always decide to, go to Harvard. And so I did that. And so as like a student producer, I worked closely with the producer. Her name is Susan Hurwitz, changed my life. She was very close with Benton because when Benton was in college, he worked for the theater program at my high school. So that was when I was in like elementary school. So we never crossed paths that way. But
did you go to Pioneer?
I did go to Pioneer.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
This is not the first time I've asked somebody on this podcast, did you go to Pioneer?
Yes. It's a high school in Ann Arbor that hires like exclusively Michigan students to do everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one day I was in school doing my thing and I get a call from Susan who was basically saying like, hey, I know you're studying the classics and I know we haven't really talked about this in a long time, but are you still interested in doing theater? And I was like, yeah, like, of course. And she was like, well, I know this person who has recently put up this show in London called Hadestown. I know that like you are studying the classics right now. I know that Greek mythology is your passion. I really think that this might be a connection worth making. And so
Whoa.
it was like my junior year of college that like I, applied to their internship program. Susan sort of called Benton up and is like, hey, I'm sending someone your way. Check her out. And that's how I got into casting, was because I wanted to work on Hadestown.
Oh my gosh, that's so cool.
So it was very random.
No, that makes so much sense. I was wondering about the relationship between like your knowledge of folklore and mythology and working on Hadestown, like if that was something that just happened to fall into place or if it was something that was sort of orchestrated. And that's really cool to hear about.
I mean, like, it's so much less about knowledge than it is about like love and passion. Like,
Right.
how much does me knowing about Greek mythology help in the day-to-day of Hadestown? Not much, but is it the reason why I can do hundreds and hundreds of auditions for this and watch like thousands of tapes and love it every moment? Like that is why it helps.
Exactly. So back to the folklore and mythology situation. This is a super sickening program. I've actually asked, like when Carter was a senior in college, I was like, why can't you get into any of the folklore and mythology classes, huh? Why can't you get into Maria Tatar's class?
There's special priority to us rare gems that went through the folk and myth department. It has to be the rarest of concentrations at that school. Yeah. Because I was one of two, I think, there were other people who technically graduated with me, but it was their like secondary, so it was sort of their minor. Like I was the only one on cycle my year. So I was the only folk and myth concentrator of the class of 2020, which is wild. But yeah, I got to take Maria Tatar's class and they absolutely let me in because I was royalty.
That's amazing. Also, thank you for sending me the syllabus for that class.
Yes.
Also, for context for our listeners, Carter, Micah, and J. Maya were all at Harvard at the same time, which I think is really funny.
Yeah, J. Maya and I were in a class together for the classics department. So we were in Women, Gender, and Sexuality in Ancient Greece, which was taught by the professor Naomi Weiss. She is amazing. And so we were both in this class. It was technically a lecture, but there were so few students that it was really more like a seminar. So I feel like that was a place where I saw her fall in love with everything. So that was cool.
Wow. And since you did the joint with classics as well as folk and myth, like classics was a lot more like language focused.
So classics had really two ways you could do it. You could do classical languages or classical culture and civilization. So like civ or languages. And I did civilization because I'm more of a history buff than I am a linguistic person. Like I loved learning ancient Greek and I hated learning Latin. And so I'm like, that track's not for me.
Camp Half-Blood, not Camp Jupiter.
Yeah, exactly. So I checked off my language requirement and then dove into the history classes.
Got it. Okay, cool. And so you're doing the history at the same time that you were kind of doing more like modern, like look at the folklore and myth
Yeah, folk and myth was a weird department. It had like one professor who was the head of department and then like some grad students and then like a bunch of people from other departments who sort of were like taught classes in that, and were like on the committee. But like my thesis advisor was on the committee for folklore and mythology, but he wasn't in the folk and myth like department. And so the classes were very random because of that. So I took a class that was like a general education thing, which was, just like your core curriculum. That was classical mythology, which sort of helped set me on the track and made me know what I wanted to do. But like with folk and myth, I mean, I took like a class on field work and ethnography. So that, is more like collecting folklore in the modern day and like talking to communities. And then I also took a class on the history of witches and witchcraft. And that was my education. And so it was a weird department. It was a very weird department. It was great.
You were like, I had a silly education and I was like, I want to hit you back with, I have a BFA in musical theater. So I don't know who wins the silly education race.
It's like people are like, oh, you went to Harvard. And I'm like, I did study witches.
You have to study witches in Massachusetts.
Oh, absolutely. We went to Salem. It was great.
That's so fun.
But like, I always would joke in college that I was majoring in witches and Percy Jackson, which is why this is all very funny.
Did you hear about, this was what, like a year and a half ago now? Like a grad student at Berkeley did a whole Percy Jackson course.
That's incredible. You can teach anything. I am all for the fact that like learning for the sake of learning is good because it helps you become a richer person and know what you love, which is what you need from life. And so I'm like, yes, teach a Percy Jackson class. Like like in my class, with Maria Tatar, we like read The Golden Compass. Like, you know, I'm like, I can read Little Red Riding Hood, and like that is amazing because I can have enriching conversations and like learn more about myself and the world.
Absolutely. Oh, The Golden Compass is one of those books that like we'll be talking to people in our normal lives and say that we have a Percy Jackson podcast. They'll be like, oh, what about the Warrior Cats? Oh, what about Golden Compass? Like, I actually never read those books as a kid, but they have been recommended to me over and over again.
I think they are considered kids' books because the protagonist is a kid. I fell in love with them as a college student. They have very adult themes.
They also have Lin-Manuel Miranda.
Oh, yeah, they do. But
yeah, many similarities.
Yeah, his Dark Materials, it's a retelling of Paradise Lost, which is not something that is necessarily like what kids will get out of it. But like as an adult, I was like, this is beautiful art.
And something, you know, I'm going to want us to get into a little bit more talking about Hadestown and stuff, but also you just did How to Dance in Ohio, and that was a huge deal. And so I wanted you to kind of tell us about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, How to Dance in Ohio for me just like was so personal for so many reasons. Like at the most basic and superficial, I became an official casting director sort of with the opening of How to Dance in Ohio. So,
did you like join CSA?
Okay, so I have sent in my application months and months and months ago, and they have not gotten back to me.
For context, CSA is not a union. It stands for the Casting Society of America. So it's something you can belong to, but it is technically not a union.
Yeah. So if there are any listeners who are in CSA and deal with applications, please help me. I promise that I'm qualified and have reached the allotted week amount.
Patron of our podcast, the head of CSA. Make sure you fast track Michael's application.
But yes, I'm not a member of CSA, but I don't need to be one to be a casting director. It's just a great perk. But, you know, How to Dance in Ohio opening was me having my Broadway debut as a casting director.
Yay.
You know, I came into Hadestown when it was already open. And so like me being promoted while still working on it is like, that team knows me. It's like, I love it. It's old hat, you know. Yeah. we have our routines, but How to Dance in Ohio is really a show where like Benton and I looked at each other and we were like, this is something that's right for me. Because How to Dance in Ohio, for people who don't know, it's a musical about a group of autistic young adults who are preparing for a spring formal. It's based off of the documentary of the same name. The characters in it, some of them are real and some of them are sort of amalgamations of a bunch of other real people, but it is really based on this story of this therapy group putting on a formal as part of like a therapy tool. Every single actor who played an autistic role in that show was autistic. So the swings and the people on stage, if you played an autistic role, everyone we cast identified as autistic, which, you know, is obviously a huge deal.
Yeah.
You know, we talk a lot about like autistic people have always been on stage and they've always been, you know, leads and doing amazing, but they haven't always been doing it and saying that they're autistic. And they also haven't always been doing it playing an autistic role and like owning that identity.
Right.
Like there are autistic people on Broadway right now, and we might not know it because that's just not part of the story of the show. And that's just like their thing. But this show really centered that. And it was about sort of having authentic casting and sort of, you know, telling the story with the people the story is really about.
That's so beautiful.
Yeah, I loved it. I don't know if I mentioned it. Like, did I just jump over the fact that I'm autistic? Sometimes I forget to say that. So
it was like triply special.
No, it was amazing. You know, it was so special for me because I was like, oh my God, this is like a little community that like, you know, and like everyone in that show, like adopted me like family. The parents were like, you know, so cool to hang out with. And like the actors who played members of the group are like my friends and I text some of them daily. And so, you know, that just changed my life in so many ways. And I don't know if I'll ever work on a project that meaningful again. I mean, I hope so. I'm hoping I'm jinxing it in reverse where I will get really amazing projects, but like it was really something special.
Yeah, I think it's good as an artist or like anyone in life to be able to like go through an experience and be like, wow, that was so special to the point of which I may never experience something that special again, because it's just the acknowledging of how much it really did mean to you and how lucky and how rare something like that can be. And then, yeah, you jinx yourself and something even better that you cannot even fathom right now will come along and you'll be like, wow, that was even better. And that was something I couldn't have thought of at a younger age because I didn't know all of these things yet. But then it will happen again and you'll be like, whoa, life's amazing.
Exactly.
I hope that some people like will become a casting director after we do all of this.
I have to warn you, it's a lot of emails.
A lot of emails. But it's really not a career that normal people will understand and like what it entails and this weird specifics of it and how there isn't a union. And
I don't get health insurance.
There's no casting directors union, which is a whole thing. And casting directors don't make the ultimate decision. No, that's something I think people don't necessarily understand. How would you like to pitch your job to people?
Like the sort of go-to way I explain it is that like, we just refer to them as the creatives. But when I say creatives at any time, I'm talking like director, music director, writer, composer, choreographer, like head producers, the sort of brains of creating this piece of art. So those are the creatives. They sort of tell us, they give us the description of the role. They might give us a prototype like, oh, I'm looking for a X 10 years ago, and do that. And then we take their list of what they want, these sort of ideas. We go off into the world. And then we try to find them from every single person that exists who might be interested. And so sometimes that has to do with like a lot of direct outreach. With How to Dance in Ohio, I was reaching out to a lot of like organizations being like, spread this around, see if anyone wants to do it. And with some, they sort of just come to us like with Hadestown. But, we might get thousands of submissions and like all these tapes. And it's my job to present to the team 10 to 15 people who I believe could all do the role, who are all across the board. Yes, like these people can do it. And then from those 10 to 15 people, the team decides who is the yes of the yeses. Like who of all of these people who are capable and meet their desires is the one. So like they don't have to worry about the thousands of people and like the hundreds of tapes. They just have to worry about the 10 to 15 people I put in front of them. That is a lot of pressure on me. It's very scary, like kind of feeling like a gatekeeper, especially because like I started doing this when I was 23, as my actual job. And I'm just like, and the idea of being like yes or no is like, this is someone's dream. And so like, so it's like, it's so easy for me to be like, but I'm like, but what if they are the one? And so like, so much of my life has been like, since doing this is about being like gaining the confidence and also keeping the humanity in it. It's like not losing either. Is being like at a certain point, I have to say, this person won't be able to do it. And at another point I have to say, but let's ask for a tape. Yeah. So it's like a balance.
There's a lot of balancing because I also feel like the longer you do this kind of gig, the more you start to understand like the specifics of what certain creative people want.
Yeah.
If you know what they sort of have in their heads, but you have an idea that maybe is also somebody who would work so well, you're like, oh, do I present this to them? Even though I know that maybe this is not what they're looking for, but it's another option. And then you have to like balance like, oh, how much am I going to like bring in this actor? If it's like, I don't know that the creative team is going to say yes, like that's just so complicated.
The biggest thing I've learned about working in casting is that you have to protect your heart, which is like a weird thing to say. But because I don't make final decisions, if I get in too deep, if I fall in love with someone for a role too much, like if I believe in it too strongly, like my heart will get broken.
Yes.
Because I have my dream, and then the team is just in another direction. And like I've had like one of those experiences that had to do with Hadestown. Like I won't get into the specifics, but like I fell in love with someone for a role. The team went in another direction. The direction was right. Like it was amazing and it was beautiful and it was not wrong. But I also think that like the person that I loved would not have been wrong either. And like the team loved them too. It was just they went in a different direction. And I had to like sit there and be like, I imagined this in my head. It fit perfectly. And it's a no. And like, and after that experience, I was like, I can't care this much. Like I have to care enough to be good at my job. But when it comes to being in the room, I am there to support the team. If they are having doubts, and they ask my opinion, I am there to reassure them. I'm not there to steer them in a completely different direction. Like, if I have experience with an actor, I've been like, oh, I've cast them in this, I've gotten great feedback. Or if they're like, we love this person, but like, I don't know, like, I can be there to be like, you know what? I thought they were great too. I think that like, they might be green, but like, I think that they can, like, I'm there to like help them reach the decision that they already wanted to make.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not there to like tell them who to cast.
Right.
And like that learning experience, like I'm always the type of person who's like, I'm not going to speak unless spoken to, but like still like learning to like let go of who I want. And just like the moment I get in the room, surrender. Like I bring someone in and out and I tape and the rest is the team. Cause like I can't get sad again. It's too hard.
It's a hard job because it's like you have to care enough to be passionate about the work you're doing, which is grueling and very long and sometimes very frustrating, but you can't care so much that you get your heart broken when your first choice doesn't end up being the direction.
Yeah.
I remember Craig Burns once said when I was an intern at Telsey, he was like, being a casting director is like hosting a party. Like, you want the party to go well, but you want the party to go well for your guests. Like, and your job is to like disappear into the background and like just be a good host.
People will be like, oh my God, that was the smoothest audition. It was so great. And I'm like, I was close to tears the entire time. I was so stressed. But like, it's, it's like, so like, it's like, I'm like frantically on my phone texting Benton to be, he's like, we need a copy of this and all that stuff. And the team is like, oh, what a day. And I'm like, that's when I've done my job well.
I messed up the Zoom on the iPad. Oh,
exactly. But it's very funny. It's like, it's that side of thing. My job is customer service, but I get the added perk of getting to like watch artists create things in front of me, which is like a gift.
Absolutely.
There's this really fun thing that happens that like, this is a thing that I want people to know because it's so cool that is special about Hadestown auditions. So for anyone who's like, I wonder what it's like in the room, this is it, which is that we as a creative team sing too. There are a lot of songs in Hadestown that have a sort of call and response aspect or sort of require participation, and we participate back. An example of that will be like Hermes doing like Road to Hell. So we go like chugga 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 chugga, and we go in and we do that. With Living It Up, we're like, yeah, where you been? Like we yell at Persephone. We like feed that and we tell them, to give it back to us. It's so fun. But the single best part of, I think, any auditions I do, like across shows, is if it's true during Orpheus auditions, because we play the workers. And it's only the back half of the song. And it's just this amazing opportunity to like have these actors,
goosebumps.
singing this song that is like about like collective organizing and like bringing together of people, and like they get to sing the lines, and like to have an actor like singing at us and us saying like we're standing with them, we hear them and we understand them as they are like pleading to us, is like every single time I'm like, oh, this is special. Like, because that's what makes a performance. Like people on stage have other people on stage. They have an audience in front of them. Auditions can be so sterile. Like you're in a box, you're at Pearl Studios or Ripley Greer, and you are singing to a group of people who are stoically sitting across from you at a table. The Hadestown auditions are so collaborative that we are trying to get the performance out of them that we would see on stage, and being able to be a part of that is like, oh my gosh, Orpheus auditions, like every single time I have one, I'm like, this is going to be amazing. So I love it.
Yeah. No, that's real. Hadestown auditions are fun. Like your creative team is fun, and like the vibe, the music is just so good. Okay. Let's talk more about Hadestown, since that was a lot about casting. And also like, I hope, if you're listening to this and you're like, dang, I want to study folklore and mythology at Harvard, go do that.
Do it. They need more people. They need more people.
Go be a casting director, especially if you're like a young, cool person with cool ideas. Like we need more young, cool people with cool ideas in the industry. Okay. Hadestown. We're all Hadestown fans here.
Oh my gosh.
Carter, you've seen it on Broadway, right?
I have, yeah. One time when I was visiting you, I like went while you were at work to go do the standing room right at the back of the orchestra. And it was amazing. I paid like $40 and it was phenomenal experience.
Oh.
Absolutely. I also did standing room the very first time I saw it, and Anais Mitchell was right behind me because it was like just before or just after the show had officially opened, and it was the coolest experience ever. And then I think I've seen it like 9 times total ever since then. And many of those times was like standing room or like getting gifted a ticket by like a family member who couldn't go or something like that. But I will stand by it being one of the greatest shows of like modern like theater history.
Oh, it's unreal. Like I get like, it's the type of thing where like, you know, I mean, and that's the point of the show is like, this is cyclical. The story is going to happen again and again. And every single time I get to parts, I'm like, I feel like I'm having chills for the very first time.
I want to know about those parts. I want to hear about the parts for everyone that like sends shivers down your spine whenever you are listening to the cast recording or watching a slime tutorial, which no one would ever do for sure, or going to the Broadway theater.
I won't say anything if you don't.
He did this recently for the Instagram where they were asking the Fates, like, what's like your favorite lyric and stuff. And I want to know about your guys' favorite moments in the show.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, like, this is like has nothing to do with the structure. It's just listening to the recording and Andre DeShields at the beginning of If It's True when he's like, basically any line he says, but when he said like, he turned to go because he thought no one could hear, but everybody knows that walls have ears. Like that line, I feel it in my body. Like, I don't know what it is about that, but like the way he says it is like hauntingly beautiful.
Oh,
but there is nothing more amazing about watching that show than watching, spoiler alert, the moment when Orpheus turns around and Eurydice has to go back to, you know, I know, I'm sorry, like the story. No, but that's
it's an old
like,
song.
You know, that's the point is that like, I sometimes have a warped perspective of the world because I have loved Greek mythology since I could read. And even before, like I loved the stories of constellations. So my world has always been infused with Greek myth. And so sometimes I assume people just know stories that I was like, oh yeah, everyone knows this story. And I just assume that. And people are like, I've never heard of that. But I think the tale of Orpheus and Eurydice, I mean, it has a history in opera and in art. Like it's one of the more known Greek myths. There's always going to be a huge percentage of the audience who knows how it's going to end. And every time you see it, there is a communal gasp from the audience. And like that, and like my mom, when she went to see it, she was like, she gasped. And I'm like, you know this more than, like, this is my show. I talk about it all the time. You know what's about to happen and you know the exact moment. And it's that like, that feeling of like, like, oh no, even when you know what's going to happen. And we were told it's a sad song.
Yeah.
And we thought it might turn out right and it doesn't. So that's a huge one. And then to take your time for this for one more second.
Please.
How long? How long was the song that before I saw the show and before I was in auditions, I really overlooked?
Same. You're like, what is this weird?
Yeah, I was like, this sounds so different.
In the middle of the show.
Yeah. And I was just like, I don't know if it's my style. And I kind of would like keep going. And I got into auditions and listening to Rachel Chavkin explain that song to actors. I was like, oh, well,
Mother.
I could never see. Mother. I used to say, I was like, adopt me. But, you know, it's this like thing of like, you know, the idea that like, this is one thing, the moment where Persephone really owns her power. It's the idea that like Persephone is a goddess. And this is a sort of like bad dog moment of like her being like, stop it. Like, you know, when she says like, what are you afraid of? Like, you know, it's like an indictment. And, you know, it's been, you know, we've had it described in auditions of like, these are two skyscrapers that are standing and facing one another.
Yeah.
Hades says like, have a drink, why don't you? And Persephone says, no, I've had enough. And it's the idea that like, this might be the first time Persephone is sober in a millennia.
Wow. Yeah.
Hades and Persephone is a love story too. You know, Orpheus and like, you know, that's the point is that these two relationships are foils. It's literally spelled out in the lyrics and epic. But like the idea is that like, oh, Orpheus and Eurydice look more obviously in love, but they're a new couple. Persephone and Hades represent old love. You know, it's the idea of like these two people have loved each other for centuries and have also accumulated centuries of hurt.
Yeah.
And that is the love story that they're dealing with. Two people who are in love and have hurt and been hurt, and like the struggles of that. And so like just like hearing all of that about that song, I was like, oh my gosh, like this is the most intelligent thing in this entire show. So I love How Long.
100%. Oh, it's so great when you get to hear the creatives sort of explain certain moments, because you know there is just mountains and mountains of intention and thought.
Yeah.
Oh,
In every moment.
it took me, I want to say, like 3 times of seeing the show until I was like, wait, this song slaps. And it's like really cool. And the way that they kind of circle the pit as they are singing the song.
And that's the thing, is like we talk about them as being like the same sides of 2 magnets. Like, you know, it's not magnets as in attracting, it's the magnets as in repulsing. And so they can never, regardless of how they move, they will never get closer. That's the standoff of it.
Oh,
yeah. It's crazy.
Yes. Carter, do you want to share your favorite Hadestown moments?
I think my moments are pretty basic.
It's okay.
For people of a certain age, I think that Eva Noblezada is like a very special, singular person.
For people of a certain age, are you calling us all old for being obsessed with Eva Noblezada?
Okay, I think
Gen Alpha also loves Eva Noblezada.
Yeah, I think it's a different experience, because I think that when we were in high school, her videos would already kind of be making it to the internet, and so people would know about her, but they'd be like, "Oh, this is like a sick up and coming singer who is like stinging everybody down through the floor, but like also I don't know where I know her from, and like she looks so young, and like what is going to happen for her?" Was something that I think, I don't know if we had conversations about this per se, but I think that, you know, this is an experience that people of a certain age will relate to. It's like having Eva Noblezada specifically be the person filling this role of like person who's going to do something like incredible, career defining, like is going to be a part of some sort of project that is going to be somehow like very important and foundational to Broadway. Like there's going to be a cast recording with her someday that is going to be iconic, but we don't know which one it's going to be yet, but she's going to sound amazing.
That just happened again with Renee Rapp.
I think that's a good analogy, because Renee was also somebody, where if you were like really on YouTube and like of a certain age, you would really know who she is before she like is in anything. Yeah. Jimmy Awards fame, perhaps. All of which is to say that I like my favorite tracks in the show. Well, my favorite track, full stop, is All I've Ever Known.
Oh, yeah.
Which I think is a very common answer. But
but every time I listen to it, I'm like, it's so smart.
When a lot of people love something, it's like, yeah, they're right. Like, I don't know. It's like, it's good. It's okay to love something that is good.
Absolutely.
All I've Ever Known, and then Flowers on the other end.
Oh, yeah. I remember you telling me you really love Flowers. And I was like, okay, sick. Because it is a very interesting song.
No, Flowers, the first time I've ever cried in an audition was when someone was singing Flowers.
Wow.
So that was like the first time that I was like brought to tears by how incredibly moving it was.
Every single time that I've ever seen Hadestown, I have failed to not start snotting up during All I've Ever Known. It's just so beautiful. The vulnerability, the private moment on stage where it's just the two of them. I think I was going to say All I've Ever Known maybe as well, just because it is very affecting. And, you know, you have to believe in that. That song has to work in order for us to care about anything else that goes on in the rest of the show. If that song doesn't land, then why are we rooting for this couple to be together? Even though Orpheus is super distracted and Eurydice is like, I don't know, somewhere else, you know, just trying to fend for herself. But I recently, somewhere around like my 5th viewing of Hadestown, I was like, oh my God, the best moment in the show is during they danced.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Absolutely.
Hades and Persephone, like they take hands and they dance. And I get like the accordion is really ripping during this song.
I'm like, get it, Liam Robinson.
Literally get it. It sounds so good. And like you said, Micah, it's like the old love. The sound of the accordion taking the lead on this melody makes it feel like ancient and like otherworldly.
Yeah.
But you're being like let into their world and their love. And then also the choreo, just like the staging in that moment, it breaks my heart every time. There's like a moment where they're holding hands and then Hades and Persephone separate hands and Persephone runs the circle of the turntable and Hades just holds his hand out and as he's waiting for her to come back, but he like willingly lets her go. And then she comes all the way back and they hold hands again and he like starts to cry and I start to cry because that's like that is like the story of their entire relationship in like one 10-second piece of movement and it gets me every time.
It's so good. It's so good. Fun fact for classics nerds, watching Hadestown, you'll notice a lot of parallels to like ancient Greek tragedy in that you'll see that there are 2 choruses. which you'll see in Greek tragedy. So you have the fates, and then you have the workers. In Greek tragedy, you have these two different forces that talk to each other. You'll also notice that they have, these like sort of like 5 principles, but they are rarely all on stage at the same time. Of the principles, you're normally seeing like 2 or 3 of them at a time, which is true of Greek tragedy because they had a limited number of actors playing all the roles. So actors would play multiple roles. So they couldn't all be on stage at the same time. The fates are sort of taking this role as like, in some plays you'll see them as like the Furies, or, they'll be like the Muses. And so like they all fill those roles. And so it's very much modeled as a Greek tragedy, but in the world of musical theater in a way that can be comprehended. Also, Hermes saying at the beginning how it's going to go, that's Greek tragedy 101.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's so good.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, I think we'll transition out of talking about
we've been talking for 45 minutes and we have yet to talk about Percy Jackson. But one last thing, fun fact, when I was an intern at Stuart Whitley, do you know what we were actively working on? Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief musical.
Yay!
So my office cast it. I'm a huge fan. That's a great show. I still listen to the music. Good Kid slaps every time. I have like a Percy Jackson Lightning Thief jacket that I have worn to the point of being unwearable.
Oh my gosh, I'm super jealous. We just talked to Joe Trace the other week.
A genius.
Oh, 100% a genius. Like everything he said, I was like, oh my God, you're so articulate. Yeah. And like have thought about these characters so deeply, because sometimes I think there are a few people on the planet who have thought about these characters more than we have, but there
always are.
There always are
people that are, riding the same wavelength. Yeah. I just think, my big thought on Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief, Lightning Thief musical, is that I think it 100% nails the tone of the books. I think like the TV series has to do it differently because it's a TV series, but like I was like, the musical gets the humor and gets the stupidity of it in the best way possible.
Yeah.
It's play. It's chaos. Like that show is chaos. And that is what Percy is like in the books. Like that hyperactivity, you see it in Christmas Carol, like, regardless of the fact that he's not 12. Like, so that production, always iconic.
Yeah. Okay. Percy Jackson. Okay. Percy Jackson adaptations. Okay. Casting. Okay. So what did you think about the Percy Jackson season 1? What did you think perhaps about some like casting choices? We are, for our listeners, I think I failed to mention this at the beginning of the episode, but we're going to end today with like a fun like fan casting for season 2. So that's on the horizon.
Yeah. Okay. So like I'm always of two minds because I'm a writer. And so when I get into something, there's nothing I love more than like dissecting like structure and like analysis. My biggest thing is that like, to just first talk about like first impressions. One of the things that is my life goal is to help us deconstruct the response that people, and I'm not saying that this is like the mass response, but the gut response that a lot of fans of books have, that they say like, oh, it's not as good as the book, or, oh, they didn't do this. And I think like we have to always remind ourselves that adaptations are not reproductions and they can't be.
Say it again.
As I said, adaptations are not reproductions.
Yes.
Text cannot be translated to screen directly because they are opposites. Text is about the interior experience. It is about thought. It is about perception from the view of the character. You are able to talk about the world as it's happening around the character. With movies and TV, they are moving pictures. You cannot convey the internal experience of characters, which means in books, you can always understand the motivations of someone's action because you are in their mind to some extent. I mean, like the sort of person that books are written in can like change, but like you understand their motives because you're in their brain. When you are watching something, you don't get to know what's in their brain. And so their actions are what's defining them. And so if you want to build characterization, you have to change things because you have to make up for the fact that you are not learning about this character in their own brain. An example of that being like Mr. Brunner. In the books, we learn that Percy loves this character and respects this character by him just being, God, I love this guy. He's a great teacher. He's real fun. But in the movies, they have to find a way for the two of them to have a conversation so we can understand why we're supposed to like this man. And so, yes, this conversation where they talk one-on-one isn't in the books, But we had to have it because we needed to know who this man was. And so there's things that have to change. And I think in order to like watch any form of media, to like watch TV and to like dissect it and, you know, have your response to it and your criticisms or, you know, your loves of it, you have to look at it as its own thing. We talk about when we're studying ancient languages that translations are creative writing.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, when you're looking at ancient texts, you cannot do things one-to-one. When you look at ancient Greek, word order, not a thing. And so like, you know, in English, we might say like, oh, like the boy threw the red ball to the dog. In, you know, ancient Greek, it might be like red ball threw the dog, the boy. Like, and you're like, what? And so like there's so much you have to change and some of the words might not have good translations. And so I have 3 translations of the Odyssey and they're all different.
I want to know which ones you have. Do you have like Richard Lattimore, Emily Wilson? And
I have Lattimore, Wilson, and Fagles.
Okay.
So those are the 3 I have. But like they're also trying to convey the emotions. So you know, certain phrases might evoke different feelings at certain times, but those phrases might not, like we think about like idioms. Yeah. Like, yes, you have to change the words because like, how am I going to explain jump the gun to someone living in 300 BCE? They're going to be like, what are you talking about? And so it's stuff like that in reverse. And so you have to change things. And book to screen is the exact same way. You have to find a way to change the content to convey the emotion and the feeling that you got in a different way.
We've been talking about this for real, like just the beauty of the fact that Percy Jackson, which in itself is a story about stories, now exists in multiple iterations of itself is so brilliant and like exactly as it should be. It should also have been translated from itself and be translated for newer generations.
You know, his Dark Materials series is like an adapted Paradise Lost. Yes, we're like, oh, this is so different. And I'm like, we should allow the Percy Jackson TV series to do that too. With instead of Paradise Lost, it's the books.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that like huge changes like need to be made because so much of the material is good, but I will never have a criticism be, oh, it's different. What I will look at is like pacing and structure. And like, you know, when we talk about the nitty gritty of TV, once we get to the end of that and see like, oh, like was the pacing weird here? Was the structure I'm not sure about? Then we can look at the source text and be like, is there anything in here that might have helped solve this problem?
Yeah.
But that's the last step. And all in all, man, I had so much fun watching it. Like, you know, it was like one of those things where it's like they were working in very difficult circumstances with the first episode. So like at the beginning, I was like, oh, I don't know. Like, I want to find out what's going on with this because I felt like the pacing was strange. But you have to recognize that they are juggling 2 things, which is that the world of like fantasy and science fiction, you have to, in your first episode, like in your pilot, start to explain the world. And you also, in anything you write, have to have stakes.
Yeah.
And this world is not like, a fantasy world that can sort of slowly be built. This is a built history and a built culture and mythology. And there is a lot to introduce very fast. And again, like we have to focus on the fact that this is for kids. We can watch it and love it, but understand that we are not the target audience. And like, that's the same with the Lightning Thief musical. People are like, oh, this is not high art. And I'm like, it's a kid's show.
Literally,
like,
it's literally for young audiences. Yeah.
Maybe the stakes don't need to be as intense as I want them.
Yeah.
Because I can take the stress. You know, I have to understand that maybe that intensity is like in certain moments is not. Maybe kids need a little more direct explanation. And that's fine and that's good.
Totally.
I think that like the show hit its stride when it had built its world and then got to tell the story. It's only 8 episodes, but I think like you are seeing it triumph, I believe, in episode 5. I think like the definitive split in sort of how this story is being built, from my perspective, is just an analytical reader, analytical viewer, is that in the beginning, you are sort of lore dumping to help create that foundation. And at times it can be like, okay, thanks for explaining this, but like, we're just standing and listening. And like, yeah, like that can be really hard. Charlie Bushnell, whenever Luke had to lore dump, he did it so well that I didn't even notice.
We love Charlie.
Amazing. It's so hard lore dumping is the hardest thing to do well. And he killed it. When he was explaining things to Percy and walking around, I could have listened to that all day. And that's very hard. So that's, a little shout out there. But like, so you have all of that stuff that has to happen first. But then when we get to, what is it called? Like the Wonder World,
Tunnel of Love, Waterland.
Yeah, Waterland, Tunnel of Love. You're learning about Hephaestus's story. That is not lore that's being dumped so that we understand the lore. It is the plot of that episode, and it is critical to understanding the story in the moment. It is all instantly relevant and instantly important to understand, which is something that has to be earned and is earned by the work they did at the beginning. So yes, at the beginning, as someone who knew the books, was like, I know all this. And I also studied this. I'm like, I know all these things. But I'm like, you get moments like learning Hephaestus' story that are so compelling because you did the work earlier. And I think that it's only going to get better and better and better once we all know the base information. Now let's live in the world. Like the world has been built. Let's play in it. So I think that. But, to get into casting.
Talk about it.
When like the main announcements came out, I was in the office. I was at Stuart Whitley. My friend Patrick, who's works over at our casting.
Love you, Patrick.
Yeah, Patrick's the best. Shout out Patrick.
Total listener of Seaweed Brain podcast.
we were looking at the list and we were just giving our instant reactions. Like when we saw Adam Copeland as Ares, we were like, this is what we wanted out of this character.
Unbelievable.
Like I have never seen WWE, but you get it. Obviously when we saw the kids, we were like, well, the kids, they're tweens and now they're teens.
We refer to them as the kids. It's okay.
Yeah. I was like so thrilled. I think it's really funny, when I was watching the movies that shall not be named, my friend always laughs because I went into a tirade on how bad the movies were one time. And I ended this long rant by saying, and Annabeth wasn't even blonde. And, and so like she found that so funny. And then when the casting came out and you obviously have like Leah playing it and like this young Black girl, when I said, and Annabeth isn't even blonde, that was not actually a criticism of the appearance not being one-to-one. It was me representing the fact that the movies seem to not care about any single thing that happened in the books.
I was distinctly the same way when the movies first came out. I was running around being like, you don't get it. This is nothing like the book. Like, meh.
Exactly. Because it was just like, that was the littlest detail and they couldn't even do that. So like that was really the definition. But when I saw the way they went with casting, as someone who like every single day in my job is trying to like diversify the stage, is like, this is thrill. It was so fun to like see the different people who are like, actors that I've known, because I could be like, oh, like what's the take that they're going to make? Like Megan Mullally, if I'm pronouncing it right.
Yes.
She can do anything. She is one of the most versatile actresses of our generation, and people don't know that. She is so skilled. And so when I saw her announcement, I was like, oh, Electo could be anything. I have no idea how they're going to go with this because whatever they decide, she can do it. And oh my God, Queen, she was so like, oh my God, she did not disappoint.
No, we were always talking about that wig. That wig is incredible that they put on her.
Oh, she was giving. But anyway, the one casting announcement that I completely missed was Timothy Odmanson as Hephaestus. I had, for some reason, I don't know if that was announced later. I had no idea. I had no idea until I watched it. I didn't even, I didn't know Hephaestus was going to be in the first season. He's not supposed to be.
He's not in the book. Yeah.
I'm like, we meet him in the Titan's Curse. And so when I'm watching that scene of Annabeth trying to figure out the chair and like this door opens, I'm like, what are they doing? Like this chair scene is already new. And so I'm like, anything could happen here. I'm like, who is this? And I hear a voice. I'm like, is that Timothy Odmanson? And then he's like his first line. And then he says another line. I'm like, that is him. And then he says like, I built it. And I was like, yes. As like someone who is autistic, as someone who is like fiercely believes in authentic casting and like casting the people whose story it is like in these roles, I really had to make it or break it. I was like, if this series does not cast a disabled actor in this role, I don't know if I can stand by it. Greek myths agree on nothing. They're constant contradictions because they're being told across decades, across centuries, in art, by poets, by orators. Like there's all these different things. In mythology, no one can agree. Was it Hera or Zeus who threw Hephaestus out of Olympus? Was it because of his leg, like, or his foot? Because like sometimes it's like, oh, it's an injury that happened afterwards, or oh, it's because he has a clubbed or an inturned foot. Like none of them can agree on the reasonings. They can't even agree on what's going on with his marriage to Aphrodite or with this chair. No, there's so many different accounts, but the consistent thing in every single one is that Hephaestus is a disabled god. And very specifically with a walking impairment. Also, I want to acknowledge, just like for listeners, that like sometimes it might be jarring to just like hear the word disabled. There's a lot of people with like very good intentions who have like sort of been like, oh, like let's use other language, like differently abled, or these other sort of things. More and more, like we're really encouraging people to say like, this is not a word to be afraid of. And if we somehow shy around it, we are making it seem darker and scarier than it is. In the United States, like a quarter of the population is disabled. You know, some of it is physical and some of it like is more invisible. Like autism, we talk about that as like in some cases a more invisible disability, because people talk to me and they have no idea. But like I'm still masking. It's still something that I'm like carrying every day. And so I just want to say, like, if someone's like, oh my God, and like same with like when I said like autistic actors as opposed to actors with autism, that's a whole conversation. And when I'm saying it, like, please trust that I am doing it because this is the community that I live in. And I also encourage you to own this language and not be afraid of it. But anyway, so Hephaestus is a disabled god. And it was very important to me that this be played by a disabled actor. You know, we talk like actors are actors. Like at the end of the day, it's the craft. But the reason why we advocate for disabled actors to play disabled roles is because there are no roles for disabled actors.
Absolutely. Yes.
Like there are so few roles that are created that disabled actors like can do.
Yes.
Not because disabled actors aren't capable, but because the writing of the show or the studio itself is not accommodating or accessible to their disability.
Literally.
And so we can say like, oh, like, why can't they do other things? It's because it's not written to allow them to. Like, like there are so many barriers in place, and there are so few roles for disabled actors. And many of those roles are not even created in a way that's accessible. I mean, like, you have shows where like the protagonist is blind, but they want to have all of these crazy action sequences and all of this stuff, and they're unwilling to hire a blind actress for that role because, you know, they don't want to deal with like coordinating that and like having to like come up with new ways of doing things. It's not that a blind actress isn't capable of doing huge fight scenes, because they are. It's that the creators aren't willing to create a new paradigm to allow that to happen. And so we talk about like the push to put disabled actors in disabled roles, and specifically actors with disabilities that align with the roles. I mean, like, you know, with How to Dance in Ohio, we had a lot of conversations with people who had other disabilities, but were not autistic. And it was a conversation about, this is a show about autism. And like, I would love for you to audition for any other role in the show, but like, this is what we're looking for here. Timothy Odmanson, 7 years ago, I'm sure you guys have discussed it, had a major stroke. And as part of his recovery, I mean, no one can speak about it better than him. But like as a part of his recovery, he had to learn how to walk again. Stroke recovery is very hard. And it's not something that ends in a, you're all better and it's exactly how you were before. Like, of course, like some people, it really depends on things. But he is, you know, a disabled actor. He identifies as a disabled actor, and walking is like a huge part of that. And so I had this clear vision for like, this is who Hephaestus has to be, and this is the actor. And I kind of won't accept less because we deserve this. I was like, we as a culture have reached the point where we need this and we deserve it. When I saw him playing the role, it was because I'm a huge fan of him. Timothy is a gift of an actor. I mean, I saw him first in Psych.
I was gonna say, are you a big Psych fan?
Oh, I'm a huge Psych fan. He ate it up. Then I never watched This Is Us, but I purposefully went into the episodes and watched the scenes he was in, like back when that was happening. You know, it's really terrifying to ever admit on a public platform that you watch Supernatural, but don't do that. Be proud. I watched that entire entire show. I've rewatched that entire show. I own it. If I can own that Roswell, New Mexico is my favorite TV show, I can own that.
If you can talk about Supernatural, if we talk about Once Upon a Time, like they're very
exactly. You know, and he was in 2 episodes, I think, and he destroyed it. I was engaged. I was wrapped. It was art on my screen. He is amazing. I would have loved to see him regardless. Like, I genuinely am a longtime fan. And seeing him in this, I was like, this is so right for so many reasons. We needed the representation there, and we also got like the most incredible actor. And it is this conversation of, we are never sacrificing talent when we do stuff. Like, when we are there's this idea of like, well, shouldn't you just cast the best person? And I'm like, that is built under the assumption that like people of color or disabled people are not going to be the best. Like, you're operating under the assumption that the best is not them, which is wrong and untrue. Like, there are so many incredibly talented and skilled and ready disabled actors waiting in the wings for us to give them a place. And they are amazingly talented. And like, so it was never going to be a sacrifice, but I freaking love Timothy Adamson. So like, that was like really fun for me. And I also like, just like in terms of adaptation, his Hephaestus is nothing like I expected or pictured. And I'm so excited to see what happens. Because, you know, in the books and, you know, in the mythology, he's this like, he is a god who does his craft.
Big, burly.
He actually is a laborer. Like he's calloused and burnt and gritty and strong. And Timothy Edmondson, his portrayal is the tinkerer.
I was going to say tinkerer. I was going to say exactly that word. Yes.
Like the brilliant inventor.
Yes.
Which is a side of Hephaestus that the world has deserved for a long time.
Yeah.
And like, I don't care how many times they bring him in when he's not supposed to be brought in. I'm so excited to see what they do with it, because that take on Hephaestus is fascinating. And the way he was like, I am not one to be pushed around. I was like, this is thrill. Like, this change is thrilling to me, and I love it.
He's maybe not the Hephaestus we think of when we think about like Charles Beckendorf.
Absolutely
but
not.
He is the Hephaestus we think about when we think about Leo Valdez.
Yeah. And it's like, and that's the thing, is that these gods are all of the above. And I think, you know, what's been really interesting to me is the age range that they've chosen for the gods.
Yes, I think about that all the time.
Because there are characters like Artemis who are going to be played by a young actress, but are also going to be older. And I'm interested in seeing how they do that. Like, when I'm thinking about Apollo, I'm like, I feel like they've got to go young. Like because there has to be a match with Artemis, like not young, but like he is, I feel like that's a character who is stuck to his identity as a leading man.
It's going to be giving like early 20s actors who could play 15.
Could play high schoolers. Yeah.
So intrigued about seeing where they go with that role. And I'm really open to sort of seeing how they've changed these characters. I thought that Toby Stevens was just like a fun choice for Poseidon because of the Black Sails connection.
Right.
He played a pirate.
I'm seeing Corruption tomorrow night. Toby Stevens in Corruption tomorrow night.
I mean, and he's so good. And so like, you know, and I think like those are the types of casting decisions that are like incepting you, in the sense of like, if you're familiar with him from Black Sails, you're like, this person makes sense with the ocean. And so I have already bought in.
It was almost the same thing I realized now that I have seen Black Sails with Jessica Parker Kennedy playing Medusa.
Exactly. With her, when I was watching a performance, I was like, oh, she's such a compelling Medusa, but I would have loved her Circe.
I was thinking about that too. Oh my God. I was like, oh, we can't cast her as anything else now.
Because if she hadn't done that and you were like fan casting Circe, I would have said her.
She could have even played Athena. Like, I know she's younger, but like she could have played Athena too.
That's permitted. We can have a young, like, it doesn't matter. They can be any age they want to be. They literally can. They're allowed to. Like, they can do whatever they want. So she would have been amazing. I wish we could have had her longer, but she, you know, when she was on screen, she did what she had to do.
I want to ask you so many more questions about your takes on the show, but I'm gonna have to ask them to you another time. I want to hear I have specific questions. But I think that we should wrap today with like, if anybody has specific thoughts on casting for season 2. There's like a lot of characters
Oh my
among
gosh,
like
yeah.
it's not just Tyson and then like a little bit of Talia at the end. We've got Cersei, we've got like the pirates on Cersei's island, we've got Beckendorf, we've got the voice of Blackjack, the Estragonian giants. Critical. Technically, Ganymede makes an appearance in Sea of Monsters. I think it'd be really fun if we did cast that part, knowing that he makes an appearance later on in the Riordan verse in Chalice of the Gods. So yeah, I only have like really 2 thoughts here. So I was just going to open up the floor if anybody has strong feelings on season 2 castings.
I occupy so much space with my voice. Because I love to talk.
This is your episode.
No one lets me talk about
episode.
this stuff. People are like, quiet nerd, and I'm like, okay. So this
Quiet nerd.
This is really thrilling.
No, on Seaweed Brain, we're like, speak nerd, speak monitor.
But I think, you know, I have less of like a direct pitch, you know, for a lot of these things on like who it should be, and more of a like, what type are we looking for? Because like when we think of Athena, I feel like with the casting of the gods, they are and they should leave the races somewhat open of like what race their kids are going to be versus them, because I don't think we need to have cabins that are entirely or half of one race. Like, you know, like it's this idea of like these kids are one thing not actually related to each other in how they understand.
There's no DNA, et cetera, et
yeah,
cetera.
and so like it's fun. Like they can sort of do anything. But like I was thinking in terms of Athena, it's like if we are looking at different ages and like we are like, and I'm like, you know, who would be an iconic Black actress to do this? Well, split the ages, a Kerry Washington or a Viola Davis. Like,
yes.
Yeah, like, you know, it's like both the way they keep talking about Athena as like, we know how she is. And this like, this idea of like this Athena, which is like still Athena, is like unyielding.
Yeah.
Which, you know, both of those women have like shown more than anything that they were capable of doing that. So that would be really exciting. For Beckendorf, I don't know, because it's one of those things where it's like how young, like he's one of the older campers, but like how, you know, because especially like when we think about Talia and, you know, we start even thinking ahead to like Zoe, like there's all Talia, sorry, there's all, which is the correct pronunciation. And
I have not. I'm really bad at training myself to do that.
It's theta. Like that is the right way of doing it. But like I listened to the audiobooks for a long time and they said Talia. And I said, okay, I'm going to ignore my training for that. But Thalia, we're looking ahead at Zoe. We're thinking like, how old are these actors going to be all like by the time we get there? How old are they going to look? Like how old is everyone going to look when they are filming Sea of Monsters? I don't know.
They're going to look 16.
Yeah. And so I'm like, how do we cast ahead? Because they're growing so fast. And like these younger roles. In terms of like the voice of Ganymede or Blackjack, I love Justice Smith as an actor. I think he's
Me
great.
too. Oh my God. I am a huge Justice Smith fan.
And I don't know where he fits in this.
But we have to get him in.
Wait, if he doesn't fit in a role, let's make him a voice. I'm like,
yes.
He's so compelling. So I love him. But yeah, I joke that I can't talk about Tyson because I know who I want as Tyson and I can't say anything about it. But just know that I do know who I want, and I'll leave it.
Know that they are actively casting right now. I know I mentioned that on Twitter, and I caused a frenzy. It's not an open casting; it's a closed casting.
It's a closed casting invite, but like, you know, regardless of who I want it to be, just understand that when they announce it, I'll be like, "That's who I wanted the whole time."
Got it.
I will
prepare to be gaslit by Micah.
Exactly. I know who I want. And it will be whoever is cast, regardless of if that's true or not. Just prepare yourself.
Well, it's a hard role to cast because they're looking for someone who is like ideally above 18, you know, so they can work like normal adult filming hours. But then also like is gigantic, but then also can play very young. It's extremely specific.
Yeah, you're looking for height. You're looking for an amount of like broadness. You're allowed to be in your 20s because, you know, these characters are going to get older and Tyson's a monster. Like, you know, like he always needs to be physically imposing. Yeah. Because that's who he is.
And he literally is the comedic backbone of this season.
Yeah.
With, you know, Grover being separate from the group, like Tyson literally will have to be the comedic relief, the tension dissolver / the tension creator. So it's a complicated role.
Yeah. So I'm excited to see whoever does that. It's thrilling.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, I don't know. With the other roles.
Yeah. I didn't have a ton of specific thoughts. I thought voice of Blackjack, Bretman Rock. Similarly, I just want Bretman Rock in the show. I don't care where. I think he should be somewhere.
I'm just like, put him in, coach. Like,
I think he has an unbelievably recognizable voice. And while I understand the whole fan desire to get Ryan Reynolds into Percy Jackson, and people are like very big on like Ryan Reynolds should be the voice of Blackjack. I think we should go the opposite direction, and we should have Bretman Rock instead. Somebody with a very recognizable voice, somebody who you want to be, carrying you to safety. I think that's Bretman.
Yeah, exactly. What's funny is I wrote down some ideas somewhere and now I can't find my notes. And so just pretend that I had some like really great pitches.
That's fair. I was thinking George and Martha. I know I pitched this before, but I think Carter and Erica would do a good job.
I know. I hear that they have a really interesting repertoire that would mirror.
I think Scylla and Charybdis, again, could also be Erica and Carter. I doubt that they have any lines, but I think that we should be credited.
Oh, yeah,
I also was thinking
we should do that.
Yeah. Voice acting. The Stymphalian birds that attack during the chariot races.
That should be you.
I also think that could be Erica and Carter. I know I pitched this one before, but the Gray sisters, that could be Erica, Carter, and Micah.
Exactly. I'm ready. Give me one tooth or one eye.
We needed a third person, so I think this is perfect.
No, exactly. So when I was thinking about Thalia, that was my problem is I did have ideas, but they have all now aged out of it in a sense.
Right.
But like in terms of type, I was like Amanda Stenberg, like Amber Midthunder, which are sort of like that could also be Zoe. I, as like a Hadestown stan, I want Issa to be in something.
Issa?
So Zoe's ethnic identity is always like she like seems like, like this. And so like,
but they don't describe her as specifically.
Yeah. So when we're doing casting, like our goal would be to be like, well, they didn't explicitly say it, but fans saw this. Some people felt really represented in it, and let's give them that.
Right. Oh my God, I love Issa, by the way.
Yeah.
I'm so pissed that I don't get to see Issa and her dad in Hadestown before I leave. I'm unbelievably mad. I was planning on seeing it literally on Friday, but I can't go.
Yep. But yeah, so it's going to be exciting regardless. I think like the gift of having a show with young people is you get to meet new actors. Like it's the next generation. We're really used to, and like, things like Oppenheimer where they're like, let's throw every celebrity that we've ever heard of in one movie because we can.
Yeah.
If anyone's looking to hire me in the future and they want to work on a project like that, I'm bored with it.
Yeah.
I like how you're like, cast me in anything. I'm like, I'm staring down you, the writers of Percy Jackson. Hire me. I'm like, I will drop everything. I will get you coffee. I will get you water.
Literally.
This is my dream. And I promise you, I'm smart. I may not look it and I may not sound like it sometimes. I did really well in school and I feel like I could be really good.
I've literally been thinking about it. I'm like, I've been like in my head, I'm like, can I take a year off of acting to work as John and Dan's assistant?
I would do a total career shift. I will start back as an assistant again.
Literally.
Like I'm ready.
PA.
Like exactly. I'm just like, contact Seaweed Brain Podcast. They have my email. Again, Micah Johnson-Levy, graduated from Harvard. I was going to go to Oxford to study classical archaeology. I did do that, but you should just know. Please hire me.
I recently had several resume drops of a similar nature on this podcast.
I'm just like, it's like I'm here to talk about Percy Jackson. I'm also here to network.
This podcast has actually become networking for the Percy
Jackson. You've had important people on this, and I can't ignore that.
100%.
I am kidding, and I'm not kidding.
I don't think any of us are kidding. Actually,
we're not kidding unless you want to. Yeah, unless you actually try to offer a job.
In which case, I will move to California or wherever you are filming right now.
Kidding if you think this is like so cringy. Not kidding if like maybe Dan and John are looking for an assistant.
Yeah, like exactly. It's like I promise you won't regret it. But again, if you think it's cringy, this is my stunning sense of humor that you will also enjoy if you hire me.
It's not a bit, but we're doing a bit.
We're doing a bit.
Carter, did you have any final fan castings you want to drop?
The fan cast that I've been thinking the most about for this is Cersei, and it's one that I think would be the most exciting for me. I know whoever they cast is going to end up being very slayful.
That could also be Erica and Carter in a single trench coat.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I think that, we could like take turns if they're worried about like scheduling or labor laws or something.
Yeah, like the Olsen twins.
Yes, exactly. We'll just swap
like
out.
One of you needs to take a nap. The other one
goes
goes
thing
in.
I will say is that when I was in middle school, we were forced to watch this like miniseries adaptation of the Odyssey in which Cersei is played by Bernadette Peters and Calypso is played by Vanessa Williams.
Okay. Wait, I'm sorry. What is this?
Yeah, what is
Mini
this show?
Have you not heard
Explain
of
it
this?
more.
I think it was an adaptation of the Odyssey that I want to say was on BBC or something. It was like a limited series thing in which Bernadette Peters was Cersei and Vanessa Williams was Calypso. And this was very formative for me. And this was also, I would have seen this in the same year roughly that I was really into the Woods for the first time. And so at the time when we watched this, those were the only two people who had ever been Broadway witches in Into the Woods, playing the two witches in the Odyssey. What I'm saying is that very few people got to see Heather Headley as the witch in Into the Woods in the pre-Broadway city center version of Into the Woods, the like successful recent revival, for which I'm sure you've all listened to Sarah Bareilles' Broadway cast recording. To me, that's a person that I've been thinking about a lot recently. I would like to see Heather Headley on television more, in TV shows that I watch, as well as in other media that I consume,
Right.
because she's very talented.
Casting to a degree is I'm a fan, and that's my idea.
I love Heather Headley as Cersei, and now you're also making me think Vanessa Williams as Hera.
Iconic.
Ooh,
Iconic.
that kind of innovation. Yeah. Wow.
Mm-hmm. I'm comfortable ending this episode discussing the greatness of Heather Headley, if y'all are.
No, that's good with me.
And also, as always, every day is a good day to announce that we have greenlit season 3. You know, we don't need to see any episodes of season 2.
Just
like, the
tell
writer's room
us.
can be on roughly episode 6 of season 2. I think that is a perfectly amazing, beautiful day to greenlight season 3 and let Netflix know who the real queens are. Show them what a real diva looks like.
Yeah, just say it. Regardless of if you've been told, say it so they can't take it back.
The streets are saying that season 3 has already been greenlit, you know?
I need one person at Disney to just decide to have an unhinged day and just say something that then becomes true.
Yeah, they're like, well, we're humiliated, so we might as well do it.
Exactly.
But yeah, I'm thrilled. I'm so excited to see what comes out of this. I think that like these actors are going to grow and get so strong.
Yeah, me too.
And I'm really excited to see more of them. I want more.
Micah, this has been a delight, and you're going to be coming back here. This is the first but not the last appearance.
Yeah, no, this has been a delight. I mean, like, truly, I graduated from college again with a degree in folklore and mythology and the classics. And all anyone ever said is, what are you going to do with that degree? The answer is Beyond Seaweed Brain podcast.
Yes! Maybe now this will shame my former roommate who was a classics major and then got an MFA in translation to actually come on this podcast and finally talk to us about Greek mythology. You probably know them, actually.
Yeah, I probably do. Classics kids, we were also a smallish department.
How did you wish to name drop and shame them right now into coming to the podcast?
Yeah, Muhua Yang, I know that you're building a beautiful career in, publishing great translations of classic works in New York, but
come on,
there's always a higher level of esteem, and that higher level of esteem is Seaweed Brain, a Percy Jackson podcast.
Yeah. So fun.
Yay!
So cool. Yeah, I'm just happy to be here.
Do you want people to find you anywhere, or do you have anything you'd like to promote?
Yeah, I don't really, I don't do much of the social media, but you can always check me out at Micah, which is MICAH _Marie MARIEJL. Just sometimes theater stuff comes up on there. Sometimes it's, videos of me like talking about the industry.
Yeah.
And also just like reach out to me individually. Like if this is stuff you love to talk about, as like the final personal note, like Greek mythology is my special interest. Like as an autistic person, like I fell in love with Greek mythology when I was a kid and I never fell out of love with it. I, was lucky enough to be able to turn my special interest into a degree, which is the crazy joy of like a liberal arts education.
Yeah.
But like, I have the copy of Greek Myths by Robert Graves that was gifted to me by my grandmother when I was probably like in 6th grade, that says like, to our future classicist, or like to our budding, like that. And I rediscovered it forever ago. And I was like, oh my God, I did that though. Like I actually studied the classics. And it all started because of Percy Jackson. Like truly, like I loved the stories of the constellations, but like those books are what kickstarted like my like lifelong love. Like truly, this series means so much to me. and really changed my life. So I'm thrilled to see that like the world is growing and that more and more people are continuing to be introduced to it because it's so special. It's great.
Yay! All right, everybody. We will see y'all upcoming. Should this be the first episode in which we announce we're doing the freaking Kane Chronicles? So you should go and pick up a copy of The Red Pyramid and get into it. Yeah.
Incredible.
Bye, all.
All right, bye, y'all.